What if the iPhone in your pocket is on its way to becoming the new Nokia? It sounds crazy, right? But the fall of a tech giant isn't a sudden explosion. It's a slow burn, a quiet sickness. And right now, Apple is showing some of the exact same signs of arrogance and strategic missteps that made Nokia a trivia question. We're not talking about an overnight collapse. We're talking about a quiet erosion of dominance, a series of small fumbles that could add up to a seismic shift. This isn't just a prediction, it's a look at the chilling parallels between a fallen titan and the company that currently sits on the throne. The evidence is starting to pile up. The groundbreaking innovations we used to line up for have been replaced by slightly better cameras. And in the most important tech race of our lives, artificial intelligence, Apple was caught napping. This is the story of how the world's most valuable company could be walking the same path to irrelevance that Nokia once did, and how most of us haven't even noticed. Before the iPhone, there was a king. This is the story of how that king was dethroned. To understand the real danger Apple is in, you first have to understand the ghost that haunts the entire tech industry: Nokia. If you didn't live through it, it's impossible to capture the sheer scale of their dominance. In the early 2000s, Nokia wasn't just a phone company, it was the phone. They were the definition of reliability and innovation, and at their peak, they had nearly half the global market. They seemed utterly untouchable. Their fall was so fast and so complete, it became a legend, a cautionary tale told in business schools across the globe. Overnight, people went from asking, "What Nokia do you have?" to "Do they even still make phones?" So what happened? It wasn't one thing. It was a deadly mix of bad tech choices and leaders who got way too comfortable. Nokia's leadership, blinded by their own success, completely misunderstood where the future was headed. They saw the world through the lens of hardware. They were masters of building tough, reliable phones. But the future wasn't about hardware. It was about software. They were polishing the brass on the Titanic while a new world was being built. While Apple was building the beautiful app-driven world of iOS and Google was creating the open, flexible Android ecosystem, Nokia doubled down on its own clunky operating system, Symbian. For developers, it was a nightmare to work with. For users, it felt ancient next to the shiny, new touchscreen world of the iPhone. Nokia's bosses believed their brand name and manufacturing muscle were enough to protect their kingdom. They were dead wrong. They failed to see that the game was no longer just about selling a physical phone. It was about creating a platform, an ecosystem of apps and services that locks you in. Apple built iTunes and the App Store. Google built the Play Store. Nokia built slightly better hardware. By the time they finally realized their mistake and tried to pivot by partnering with Microsoft on the Windows Phone, it was too late. The world had moved on. In just a few shocking years, their market share crashed from nearly 50% to single digits. Nokia became a ghost, a constant reminder that no empire is too big to fail. Their story is a blueprint for decline, and right now some of the pages are looking disturbingly familiar. Apple seemed invincible, a fortress built on the lessons of Nokia's failure, but even the strongest walls can hide a fatal weakness. For the last 15 years, it has seemed like Apple built an unbreachable fortress. Where Nokia fumbled on software, Apple perfected it. The seamless connection between the iPhone, the Mac, the Apple Watch, and services like iCloud and the App Store created a user experience that was, and in many ways still is, second to none. This wasn't just a pile of products, it was an ecosystem, a so-called walled garden, so convenient and sticky that leaving it felt like a serious downgrade. It felt like stepping back in time. This ecosystem became Apple's competitive moat. It created unbelievable brand loyalty and let the company charge a premium for everything it sold. While Nokia was focused on the device, Apple was focused on the ecosystem. They knew the real value wasn't just in the phone, but in how everything worked together. Plus, Apple had a culture of relentless innovation, at least in its glory days. The iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, these weren't just new gadgets. They were entirely new categories that changed whole industries. Apple didn't just sell you a product, they sold you a piece of the future. This was the polar opposite of Nokia's stagnation. Apple was driven by an obsession with user experience, design, and a level of control, making both the hardware and the software that gave them a massive advantage. Their M-series chips, for example, are still the performance benchmark for the industry. They built a brand that means quality, privacy, and reliability, the very things Nokia once stood for before it lost its way. For over a decade, it seemed Apple could do no wrong. They built the empire that Nokia dropped, and in doing so became the most valuable company in the world. So if Apple is so different, how could it possibly be on the same path? Well, because success breeds its own kind of blindness, and the cracks in Apple's armor are starting to show. This is where Apple's story starts to rhyme with Nokia's, and it's chilling. The fall of a giant starts slowly, and it's almost always fueled by arrogance, the belief that your dominance is guaranteed. The most glaring parallel is Apple's strategic fumble on artificial intelligence. For Nokia, the disruptive force they ignored was software. For Apple, today's existential threat is AI. While competitors like Google, Microsoft, and Meta have been pouring billions into generative AI, Apple has been noticeably late to the game. Siri, once a revolution, is now a relic. The Apple Intelligence Suite, announced with huge fanfare, has been called out for being more of a catch-up effort than a bold leap forward. This has forced Apple into the embarrassing position of having to partner with its rivals, integrating OpenAI's ChatGPT just to stay in the game. The king was forced to borrow a sword from its biggest rival. This is the modern version of Nokia clinging to Symbian. Apple's traditional strengths, its focus on privacy and processing things on the device, have become a liability, limiting its AI features compared to the powerful cloud-based models of its competitors. There are even reports of deep divisions inside Apple, causing strategic paralysis and delays. While Apple debates, the world is shifting to a future where AI isn't just a feature on a phone, but the main way we interact with technology. If your phone's core intelligence is licensed from your biggest competitor, are you really leading anymore? Nokia's leaders were overconfident, believing their market share was a given. Today, Apple shows a similar kind of institutional arrogance. The wow moments at Apple keynotes have been replaced by a predictable cycle of tiny upgrades. The one more thing has become one more millimeter. We get a slightly better camera, a slightly faster chip, and a new color, all while prices keep going up. Critics and even loyal fans have pointed out that the iPhone hasn't had a truly game-changing innovation in years. This focus on polishing instead of inventing is a classic sign of a company that thinks its position is unshakable. This complacency is obvious in their product strategy. While competitors like Samsung are pushing boundaries with new ideas like foldable phones, Apple is content to just tweak its existing lineup. The Vision Pro headset, while a cool piece of tech, was launched at a crazy price and hasn't caught on with the mainstream. The cancellation of the Apple Car project after a decade and billions of dollars is another sign of a company struggling to find its next big hit. This is the behavior of a company protecting a legacy, not building a new one. Dominance doesn't just disappear, it chips away at the edges. For years, the Apple Watch was the undisputed king of wearables. But in the second quarter of 2025, that changed. Huawei, a company hit hard by US sanctions, surged with staggering 52% year-over-year growth to overtake Apple and become the world's #1 smartwatch manufacturer. While Apple's shipments fell, Huawei proved that a compelling product can still break through Apple's walls. A crown doesn't mean much when someone else is already wearing it. This isn't just one data point, it's a trend. In the critical Chinese market, the iPhone has faced fierce competition from local brands offering more advanced AI and better prices. Although Apple's sales in China saw a rebound in Q2 2025 thanks to aggressive discounts, it still ranked third in unit shipments behind Huawei and Vivo. Globally, Apple still leads the smartphone market with a 27.59% share as of July 2025, but Samsung is not far behind at 21.56%. These aren't the numbers of a company in freefall, but they do show a company whose dominance is no longer absolute. Just as Nokia ignored the rise of the iPhone, Apple risks underestimating competitors who are innovating faster and winning over customers in key international markets. Apple's greatest strength has always been its seamless ecosystem. But what happens when that strength becomes a weakness? Nokia's business model was selling phones. Apple's model is locking users into an interconnected world of devices and services. This creates huge switching costs and keeps customers loyal. But that model only works as long as the ecosystem stays on the cutting edge. The rise of AI threatens the very foundation of Apple's strategy. What happens when the main way you use technology is through a conversational AI that lives in the cloud and works on any device, regardless of brand? In that world, the walled garden starts to feel less like a paradise and more like a prison. If the best AI assistants come from Google, Microsoft, or OpenAI, Apple's tight control over its hardware and software could become a huge disadvantage. Its admirable focus on privacy might leave it unable to compete with the raw power of cloud-based AI. This is the ultimate threat, a total shift in technology that makes your whole business model obsolete. It's exactly what happened to Nokia. The path to irrelevance is now visible. But does Apple have the courage to change course? So is it game over for Apple? Not yet. But for the first time in over a decade, the path to becoming the next Nokia is horrifyingly clear. The company is at a tipping point, and the decisions it makes in the next year or two will likely define its next decade. To avoid Nokia's fate, Apple has to fight the very culture of success that made it so powerful. The number one lesson from Nokia's fall is to battle complacency. This means recognizing that their top spot is not a birthright. It demands a return to bold, game-changing innovation, not just safe incremental updates. The most critical battleground, without a doubt, is AI. Apple's leadership seems to be slowly waking up to the threat. CEO Tim Cook has said the company is open to a major AI acquisition to catch up, a huge shift from its usual strategy. The company is reportedly partnering with and testing AI models from OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, basically admitting its own efforts weren't enough. It was an admission whispered from the top of the world's richest company. We are behind. They're playing a desperate game of catch-up, and the challenge is massive. They have to do it while staying true to their brand is promise of privacy, a problem their competitors do not really have. They also have to rethink their reliance on the ecosystem. Losing the top spot in the smartwatch market to Huawei is a major wake-up call. It proves that competitors can win if they offer a better or more innovative product. Assuming the ecosystem alone will keep customers is a dangerous game. It's the same bet Nokia made on its brand. Apple's massive war chest and its billion-plus loyal fans give it a fighting chance that Nokia never had in its final years. They have the time and money to fix this, but the warning signs are clear. They have all the resources to win this fight. The only thing that can defeat them now is themselves. The parallels are there hiding in plain sight. Arrogance, a blind spot on the next big thing, and a slow erosion of dominance by hungrier rivals. Apple is not Nokia today, but it's following a disturbingly similar script. Now I want to hear from you. Are you seeing these cracks appear? As a user, do you feel Apple is still the king of innovation, or are you getting tired of the small updates and high prices? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What does Apple need to do to avoid becoming a modern-day Nokia? The story of Nokia is so powerful because it proves that in tech, nobody is too big to fail. Their collapse wasn't sudden. It was a slow decay born from the belief that their rule was permanent. Now Apple, despite all its success, is haunted by the ghost of the company it once crushed. The fight for the future isn't about a better camera or a faster chip anymore. It's about intelligence, adaptability, and the humility to realize when the world is changing around you. Apple built its empire on the ashes of Nokia's mistakes, but now it faces its own trial by fire. The question is no longer if. Apple could fall, but whether it will see the warning signs that Nokia ignored and choose a different path before it's too late.